Welcome back, Solidworks community, to part 2 of our 3-part series where we are running through how to set up configurations and configuration publisher to make assembling different versions of this geared pendant a breeze. In part 1 of the series, we manually created a few configurations of our completed enclosure part model. In this part of the series, we'll introduce how to create and edit a design table to create several more configurations, and we'll set up configuration publisher on all of our pendant components before hitting the assembly environment. Before creating the design table, I want to apply a different metal material to each of these 4 configurations. So back in the history tree for our default configuration, right-click on Material found at the top of the history tree and select Edit Material. Here I am applying a 6061-T6 aluminum material. So I'll quickly run through showing each configuration and designating a different material for each. The second configuration will be made from pure silver, the third from pure gold, and the fourth from manganese bronze. Now let's create more configurations using a design table and begin setting up Configuration Publisher. Back in the Configuration Manager tab, right-click on the part in the top of the history tree and choose Configuration Publisher. You'll get a pop-up asking if you'd like to auto-create a design table. Select Yes. And 2 windows should pop up: an Excel design table and the Configuration Publisher dialog box. First, let's edit the design table. Here you'll see the 4 configurations listed along with their various editable variables in individual rows. I'm going to create 3 more configurations of each of these 4 configurations, so a total of 12 additional. So each version of the pendant will also be configurable to the 4 different metals we designated. So I'm simply copying each row and inserting them into the design table, then editing each version's title and description so they come in aluminum, silver, gold, and bronze. Now take a look at the column titles found in row A for the materials. The most important thing here is to make sure the material column is titled properly. You will likely see the material column titled with a $, library, material. But you want to edit the column title to read with $PRP at material. This will allow us to create a control for the various materials in the Configuration Publisher. Now with each of our 4 pendant versions configured with 4 different materials, let's go to the Configuration Publisher dialog box to create a custom property manager. A custom property manager will allow us to choose from various custom parameters within the assembly environment to make choosing from our different configurations very easy. The Configuration Publisher dialog box is split into 3 panes. In the left pane you'll see the various controls for each variable in our design table. Controls can be either drop-down lists, number boxes, or checkboxes, depending on how many options each variable has. To create a custom property manager, select the variable you'd like to be able to control and drag it into the center pane. Here I've dragged the variable titled PRP at material into the center pane. This is a drop-down list which will allow us to choose from the 4 different materials we designated. Once a control is dragged into the center pane, you can change the attributes for the control in the 3rd pane on the right. Here I'm just renaming the control to material. The other 2 properties I'd like to control are the size of the pendant and the number of outer gears. For each of these variables we only have 2 versions, a small and large version, and a 3 outer gear and 4 outer gear version. So the controls for these variables appear as checkboxes. So here I am pulling the variable state at split 1, which is either suppressed or unsuppressed in our different configurations, to switch between the 3 outer geared and 4 outer geared versions. In the attributes pane you'll see that if the checkbox is checked, this variable is unsuppressed, meaning it will convert the pendant enclosure to the 4 outer gear version. So I'm going to rename this control 4 outer gears. The last control I'll pull is for the scale variable, which will allow us to designate either the small or large version of the pendant. Here again, if the user checks the box, this variable will be unsuppressed, meaning the scaling operation will take effect and create the large version of the pendant. So I'll name this control large. If you're a little confused by what all of this ends up creating, don't worry. It will all click once you see the results of this in the assembly environment in part 3 of the series. So with our controls set, go ahead and hit save, and you'll see a notification box pop up just telling you that the edits we made to the design table created several more configurations. So you can see here, using a design table is a great way to very quickly create a bunch of configurations, rather than creating them manually as we initially did in part 1 of the series. So this pendant has some internal gears that we need to create configurations for as well. There's a center gear and a smaller outer gear, each of which need configurations for the small and large versions of the pendant. I'm also going to create configurations for each size of the gear with the 4 different materials. I'm quickly running through these operations, but I'm running through the same steps just as we did with the enclosure part. I'm first manually creating a second scaled up version of each gear, then I'll use a design table to create the rest of the configurations, and I'll set up Configuration Publisher for each gear to be able to select between the small and large versions of each gear, and choose from a list of designated material types for each. Now we're ready to see the magical result in the assembly environment of all of this hard work. But you'll have to wait till part 3 of the series. So stay tuned for the final part of the series, where we will pull our parts into an assembly to show you how easy it is to drop in various configurations for each. Stay tuned.